we're gonna get into sort of bigger show picture. Moving on from episode.
Well,
we can.
I'll do my best.
And we'll like shield you from the HBO snipers if you just want to reveal something.
No, you don't want to know. You want to watch it.
You do. I definitely want to know.
Excuse me.
So, and then of course Littlefinger, because Littlefinger has been a fascinating character for me to watch throughout the series because he has had a hand in, I feel like, almost everything that has happened.
Yeah, and a lot of it.
And now, Jon should have choked him out, but he didn't. So he's in the north, and Jon is now riding to go talk to Dany. He's with Sansa, and I'm just wondering how many plates...
Oh, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, how many spinning plates of, like, people still playing the Game of Thrones can, the show stand as the White Walkers are coming down?
Well, no, that is the ultimate question. Hardhome was sort of a game-changing... Game-changing, that's such a corny way to put it. It's game-changing, get it? Game of Thrones. But it sort of was because that final look that the Night King and Jon share at the end of Hardhome in season 5, for the audience at that point understands what Jon understands, which is, oh my God, none of this matters.
Right.
This is coming.
Yeah.
So yes, the political machinations and conquest and who's vying for this throne, there is, the dread is coming. And how everyone deals with that and still attempts to or doesn't attempt to play said games within that context is what we will explore going forward for sure. And adapting to new circumstances, new allies, new surroundings, wild cards presented like a Euron Greyjoy or really a Dany. I mean, there's that great look. This is, again, like, I praise our actors, but like that's another thing where, you in those big crowd scenes, you shoot coverage of everybody. They take forever. Those scenes in the Great Hall where everyone's reacting to things, and so you've got a camera on Aiden reacting to the whole scene. Aiden Gillen, who plays Littlefinger, and there's one little bit he did where he reads the thing about Daenerys arriving, and Aiden just goes, like, oh, okay, Daenerys Targaryen's alive with dragons. Make a note of that. Like, just watching him internalize that is delicious. But yes, everybody's got to shift their plotting a little bit because of the various big forces that are coming into the world, which is sort of the whole show in a nutshell. I mean, the beginning of the show is the fantastical elements in the first season especially are largely on the periphery, and George's construct of the entire story is about that. It's about a world where those sorts of forces haven't really been in play for a long time, encroaching, on humanity.
Can I ask about that specifically?
Yeah.
First season, when I'm watching this, and by the way, the first season I watched it living with 5 to 7 other PhD mythologists in a place we call the Myth House.
Oh, yikes.
I had the good fortune of getting to watch the latest episode with several of these guys came back, and my girlfriend.
This is last night?
This is last night, yeah.
Oh,
we all got together.
God, you all probably just tore it apart.
No way. Actually, I'll tell you what, as I was preparing, I reached out to several people asking if they had questions that I should ask you or whatever, and I started to find out that everybody I know in the mythology world is watching this show. Whether it's the tremendous linguist from Colorado or the director of the Young Institute here, everybody's watching the show, and they all have incredible internal questions that they've been working for seasons. And so one of the ones that I've been playing with, and I found was common to some others, is you're talking about the boundaries, and their kind of stuff's being kept outside the boundaries. I look at the show, or I look at the world as like a kind of the 7 kingdoms as like a psyche, like the known psyche. And then the repressed, the White Walkers are what's kept out, the repressed part of the psyche. And the same thing with Dany, right? With the serpent or the dragons and the barbarians and the slaves, repressed characters generally in our psyche is the barbarians and the slaves, and the White Walkers, the dead, and the cold. So I'm wondering if you ever look at it this way and almost see, like, if anybody involved kind of sometimes sees this whole thing as one working psyche.
I'll be honest with you, no. But that, not to dismiss what you're saying, that's actually a really good question because it's a little complicated. Because all of this arose from George, so it's hard for me to speak to what George would say to that question. I know him well enough where I think I think he approaches the story first and that stuff. It's kind of what I was talking about before. It just sort of happens in a weird subtextual way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And in terms of our in terms of how we approach it, we really do approach it more in terms of character and the story, and just kind of building it out that way. Which is not to say you couldn't approach something like this starting there. It's not generally how David and Dan work. There's a practicality, I suppose. That's
Sure.
That said, you're right. That's absolutely right. What's fun about this is I think George drew so much on. The reason it's right is because George drew on world history and on classic mythical tropes that he ultimately turns on their head. And in some places he turns them on their head, and some places they play out the way you might think they play out. And because all of that is based in humanity and the human psyche, I get it all fits. But it isn't something that I think we're necessarily conscious of when we're breaking the season. It's a little more on a character by character story kind of plot point by plot point basis, and emotional arcs within that. But I wouldn't say that. I don't think we necessarily sit down and say, okay, the theme of this season is power, or the theme of that sort of just kind of emerges.
And I think for one of the things that's really interesting when I talk about this with people is the first question is it intentional? Because we got to know that. But if it's not intentional, the second question is, okay, then why are these themes showing up? They're still showing up.
Sure.
And then it gets it's interesting either side.
Well,
of
that's
it.
what's so scary about writing this show, because I think at the beginning we all hoped enough people would watch it to keep it going.
Right.
And we knew there was a following for George's books, but the show made the books a bigger phenomenon than they had been. They were bestsellers. I'm not saying that they weren't. They were very popular.
Caduceal, supporting each other.
Yeah, and so which is great. I mean, I love that the show has brought more readers to his books. Many of whom now hate our show, but I'm glad they found the books through our show. So I forget why I got it. Oh yeah, because I think it's hard to say. I totally lost my train of thought. What were we just talking about?
We're talking about the difference of intentionally working with themes and having them just show up and be surprised by it.
Oh yeah. I think it's I think that's just sort of key to how it all works. That's why, with the scariness of it.
Yeah.
The problem is it's become so big. I'm not complaining, but it's become so big and so chewed over, and everyone approaches it from a different place. I think that's why it's so popular, is because there's so many ways to enjoy it. You can just enjoy the spectacle of it and the fun of it, or there's a lot to sort of savor and to question, and to how far are they going to go with this. It's hard to, you need to sort of, as the writers, keep as much of that at bay as you can, because one television show can't contain all of that and can't satisfy all of that. You can't. And then I'm not even talking so much about answering an unanswered question. I'm not even talking about like with Lost, where it's like, well, how come they didn't, you never answered this question. And there's a degree of that too, where it's like we can't answer every question. There's some things that are just unexplained and will be unexplained. But to a larger point of theme and what is the show saying about the world now, and what
is a rising feminine happening here, or what?
It's saying all of those things, but it's also not. It's also just the story that we're telling, and we're telling a story, and these are the characters, and this is how they're behaving, and I think some people are like, well, but don't you understand? This character means this to this person, and you have to honor that. And it's like, yeah, but she or he might mean this to this person, and you can't. So it's a little intimidating because everyone owns this thing now in some way, and because there are two versions of it. You've got George's books, which are their own thing and are going to go in many ways in a totally different directions than our show, and people will be debating that. And why did we make this choice?
That makes it a myth, though. Multiple versions.
Well, I mean, I ultimately find that exciting. It's a little scary, but none of this is a complaint. It's just an observation I've had, especially in recent years, when you read, I'll find myself reading these amazing think pieces and going, oh, is it bad that I never thought of that? Should I be thinking of that? But ultimately, I think you just have to go with your instincts in telling it. This is a story, and we're trying to entertain you and make you feel something and make you think something. But you can get in the weeds.
Kind of got to let some of it just happen.
Yeah, and like any show, things happen for mundane reasons. Like that actor couldn't work that day, so we had to, or this actor's better at this sort of thing, so the character's going to shift that way, and that's all just writing a TV show,
Well,
thanks.
Maybe to that point, and to yours, is you mentioned think pieces, and it got me thinking about Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken.
Oh, God. Do we have to? No.
But more so, less like the specifics of that episode, and more just like as a creator working on something that has this overarching thing. You're telling a story over what would be 8 seasons and 100-ish episodes, a little under 100.
A little under 100.
And how is the conversation? Like I think of art as like we are in conversations with art. Like we watch the show and we have our opinion, and you write the show. But then just how does the show, like how do you guys communicate? I don't know if I'm saying this right, but like communicating with the show, like you're getting the feedback and you're seeing how things have played out and addressing things and maybe changing course if you need to. Or
yeah, I mean, the guys really, David and Dan really kind of keep that at bay. I'm much more engaged, and maybe it's not a good idea. I don't know. With feedback and reaction and how it's playing culturally, I think they step back a bit from that and just kind of focus on doing the show. But they sort of have to. I mean, they have more to do than I do. They're the showrunners. I mean, they eat, sleep, and breathe this 365 days. I mean, they don't really have time to take a lot of that in. But I mean, let's talk about it. With Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken, the infamous, controversial Sansa wedding night rape episode, which yes, I wrote. It started a very important cultural conversation, and I think because the show it has so many eyeballs on it and is enjoyed by such a wide variety of people, this particular plot line going the way it did raised a lot of feelings about, I mean, everything from how it was handled to whether or not that subject can be or should be dramatized at all. And those are all worthy discussions. I learned a lot from all of it. It's something that I'll think about, in my career going forward for sure. And I would never invalidate anyone's feelings about that scene. I could only know why we wrote it the way we did and how we approached it the way we did, and I can defend that, and I have. But I think the only time that kind of criticism bothers me is when assumptions are made about our motives, or bad faith assumptions are made about our motives, which that was the only part of that entire swirl of controversy that continues even to this day, 2.5 seasons later. The assumption of sort of bad faith on our part or my part for having scripted it, that bothers me. But again, it comes from, I don't think it comes from just a snarky place. I think people really felt how they felt about the scene. But anyway, yes, I absorbed a lot of that, and it certainly, I wouldn't say it changed what we were going to do on the show. I think a lot of people, this also bothered me a bit too, certain culture critics were saying, well, season 6 was clearly a response to how people reacted to season 5. Well, we knew what was going to happen in season 6. I mean, everything that happened in season 5 was meant to set up season 6. Everything that happened to Sansa was meant to inform her journey. The entire thing was about Sansa retaking the North. And so the assumption that we're reading the stuff and going, oh, we shouldn't do that then. I mean, I can tell you right now is not how David and Dan operate. But that said, I find it valuable to take the temperature of how everyone is to a point. I think you can really do yourself a disservice as a writer if you're reading every comment, and I used to do more of that. I do much less of it now. But I learned a great deal through that entire thing. But that said, I am proud of the episode. I'm proud of Sophie's performance in it. I'm proud of the arc, as controversial as it is. And it doesn't satisfy a lot of people, and it probably never will, no matter what I say about it. But anyway,
I thought that was kind of an interesting note you had there of how things that happen in the show kind of create that cultural ripple. And I was wondering if it ever goes like the other way for you, if things happening in culture today and politics today ever influence the show at all.
maybe again, sort of without thinking about it, but
The wall. Just kidding.
well, it's interesting. I mean, God, can we get through any conversation without Trump coming into
sorry.
it? But no, it's
I'm involved this
no,
time.
but it's an interesting thing because, for instance, like I said before, we've had sort of we met with George right before we started writing season 4 to sort of talk to him about his plans, and we then sort of started the overall mapping out of the rest of the series in the broadest of strokes. And David and Dan did that more than I did. It's their thing, and I take this very seriously. And this isn't my job on this show is to help them write their show. I bring whatever I can bring to it. I hope that I bring some of myself to it, but it's their show, and I'm the guy that helps them write it. So, for instance, this season 7 subplot was mapped out, and we were well into shooting it long before Donald Trump was elected president. But I remember, and the whole Brexit thing was happening in the UK while we were shooting it. So as we were shooting that Cersei scene from last night's episode, even James Faulkner, who played Randall Tarley, came up to me and said, "Oh, darling, it's the Brexit scene, isn't it?" Because it was a Brexit scene. It was all about preying on people's xenophobia and fear of other and fear of the foreigner and nationalism and we're in this together. It's up against them, us against them. Da 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 da. And it all, it all absolutely is can be referenced or can be connected to things that are happening now. But no, we weren't in the room going, how do we, we're gonna rip this from the headlines. It sort of just happens that way because these kinds of characters have existed. Trump has existed in one way, shape, or form throughout history,
And, Tolkien
and always
says,
will.
Tolkien says the same thing about Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Everybody wants to project World War I in those stories, and he says, "No, please stop doing that. World War I is just the most recent historical example of very eternal."
This stuff has been
characters
happening forever. Yeah. All of this stuff's been happening forever. I think that's an important thing to remember. From the world politics stuff to the sexual it's all been happening forever. The damned human race is what it is, as it always has been. So, which is why and that's what makes George. I mean, you really should bring him in to ask him these questions because he's just his knowledge, his incredible knowledge of world history, and the most obscure world history, and again the personal undercurrent of all of these events of world history, and that's key. It's not just rattling off facts. He has an understanding of the personal in all of these events and characters, and he draws on all of them. The Dothraki are modeled somewhat on the Mongols. There's just it's all. I mean, and if you read about the Mongols sometime, the Dothraki are pussycats compared to the Mongols.
I thought they were maybe the. So I wanted to ask you this because I know you worked in the Arthurian mythos,
Yes.
And so I was wondering if you saw
by way of Disney, but yes, because I.
Right. So we got a chance to talk about this one night at Krista's.
Yeah, when we met.
birthday.
Yeah. I need to send you that script.
Please do.
Can I send you that?
I would love to see it.
It's fun. We were trying to get a director to make the damn thing, but.
Well, I can't do that, but I would love to look at the myths.
No, I love it. I'm really pleased with how it turned out.
Cool.
I think it'll be a really terrific movie if we can get it going.
I'm really excited about those scenes you're telling me about with the comparisons where they're turning into different characters and that kind of thing. That was the kind of you were in the original cartoon. They turn into different things. They're like these shamanic training sequences.
Oh yeah.
About your,
which is all T.H. White. It's all.
Yeah. Well, here's a perfect example, by the way, of somebody who wrote a PhD in Arthurian legend and then wrote the novel as part of it, so that's story scholarship. But
and T.H. White. I mean, Sword in the Stone is absolutely about. A response to World War II. I mean, the Sword in the Stone is taking the Arthurian legend and writing a pacifist book.
I hadn't thought about that.
A call to pacifism. Reason over violence. an enlightened age. That's him taking a classic thing and bringing it into a modern context.
So what I wanted to ask you about the Arthurian stuff, because you mentioned the Dothraki, and they jump out to me as Hengist and Horsa, the two horse.
Oh, sure, yeah, and that's what's so great about what George does is I'll take a bit of the Mongols and a bit of, and like that's what he does. And that's what we've sort of done on the show, even in terms of the design ideas, is because it's a fantasy world. You can draw from all kinds of stuff. I've got like a Roman Corvus coming off of Euron Greyjoy's ship. As far as I know, I don't think the Vikings had those, but ours do. It's and that's what's kind of fun about it.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you is your writing stuff and having spent so much time with the Arthurian content. Do you ever start to identify and notice things, or start to borrow and
Oh,
read?
sure. Yeah. I mean, a little bit. It all kind of comes from George, so I'm sure I know.
Right.
I mean, I know George loves The Once and Future King.
Yeah. Okay.
Loves that book. So I think he considers it one of the essential fantasy epics. So, and there's a lot of that kind of down and dirty, lived-in quality of these are families living in a castle that are like you and me, that is very much drawn from Once and Future King. Because Once and Future King took Arthurian legend out of, and thus Sir Lancelot, they took it out of that kind of Mallory verse and made it contemporary to a degree. So George is very much influenced by that book. Yeah, I guess so. Again, kind of just subtly. I don't know if I've ever really drawn anything specifically. I mean, maybe if I thought of something,
Unconscious is just as good to me.
Yes.
Yes, I don't know. I've been lucky. One of these days will bite me in the ass, but.
All right. So we're winding down. So I have one sort of final question to get you out of here. What is one thing with Game of Thrones that you are excited for fans to see coming up in the rest of the season? Or like a theme.
You think how I can answer this?
Does
Yes.
a gestural answer, perhaps?
Yeah.
Cut the cameras.
Yeah. No, it's really. I mean, this isn't anything I haven't said before, but again, the worlds colliding is this season was the most exciting thing for all of us, I think. So that will continue to happen in various ways. Yeah, and just again, like I think there's a kind of momentum and propulsiveness to the storytelling this season that I found exciting. I think it'll be fun for the audience to watch. It's a bit again unmooring because it's not quite the rhythm that Thrones has been up until this point, but I think it's fun. So yeah.
Very awesome. So with that, we will let you go. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Ryan, for coming
Great
in.
questions. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you all.
Thank you guys for watching. And everybody,
Appreciate it. Thank you.